please put your hands together for the Oh God What Now Way crew. Dorian Lynskey, Jonn Elledge, Arena Conte, and The Guardian's John Crace from The Guardian. Hello, I hope you had a nice break thinking about the good election. So here come the bad elections. In a couple of minutes, games also. In a couple of minutes, we'll be asking Marie to account for the behaviour of her fellow countrymen and women in the French election, as we always do, and then staring into the abyss of the American presidential election. But first, another game. This one is very simple. It's called Fake MP or Real MP. As is often the case with electoral blowouts, this election gave us a huge influx of exciting new talent that we cannot name with a gun to our heads. So each of our panellists is going to read out very short biographies of MPs who they may or may not have made up, and you, the people, are going to guess if they are real or fictional. John, your first MP.
Emma Foodie is the Labour MP for Cramlington and Killingworth. The daughter of an NHS worker father and a mother who worked for Northern Rock, Emma herself previously served as Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Nottinghamshire. She can often be seen around Westminster with her border collie, Roni.
Okay, no, this is not going to work. I don't mean democracy, I'm sure that'll work. If you think it's true, please shout out. If you think it's false, please shout out. False! It's a nail biter.
We did not think that through, did we?
It's the same number of people. Yeah. John, real or fake?
Both Emma and Roni are real.
I thought
she's married to the MP for Nottingham North, who's been the MP since 2017 and who I've also never heard of.
Marie.
My bios are shorter. I feel like we should have agreed on a length before, but here we are.
He's always showing off. Paid by the word.
John Davies is the new Labour MP for Bolton South East. He was chair of the Cambridge University Labour Club and spent most of his pre-parliamentary career working as a lobbyist, both in public affairs agencies and for the water industry.
Ooh, it's convincingly boring. Please shout out if you think it's true. Or false? False! Oh, they say false. Marie, have you made up a boring MP?
False.
John.
Okay. Lincoln Jopp is the Conservative MP for Spelthorne. He is the holder of the MC and has shrapnel in his head. His wife was played by Kirsten Scott Thomas in Military Wives, and his stepfather served as both a Tory, Labour and SDP MP and invented the After Eight mint.
Okay, true? True! False? False!
It is true.
That's amazing!
Get him on the
show! John, your second MP.
I can't follow that. Sir Ashley Fox is the newly elected Conservative MP for Bridgwater. He worked as a solicitor before representing Gibraltar as an MEP, in which role he was the British lead of the One Seat campaign, which was meant to stop the European Parliament from moving about. He also accused the Spanish government of nationalistic tub thumping.
True? Or false? False. That's true, right?
It is true. He was actually very involved in Brexit and nobody noticed.
Ashley Fox, as you say?
Ashley Fox.
Which is, because that does sound like a Tory MP in a sort of middling TV drama, doesn't it?
Why do you think I picked him?
Marie.
Margaret Jones is the new Liberal Democrat MP for Somerton and Frome. She worked for an animal rights charity before entering Parliament and earned a spot in the Guinness Book World of Records by swallowing £50 coins in under a minute.
True? Or false?
Boring, yeah, false.
John?
Now, I spent so long, by the way, trying to figure out the number of pound coins. Maybe believable.
We appreciate the effort.
Okay. Josh Taylor is 25 years old and the Labour MP for North West Cambridgeshire. He went to school at Barnard Castle before going on, obviously, to Oxford. And his main achievement was to win a Duke of Edinburgh Gold Award. He also did start a tech. He was involved in a tech startup that was wound up after 9 months. He is now on the WhatsApp group for all the new Labour MPs called Josh.
True? Or false?
False. Though it is true that there is a Labour WhatsApp group for all new Labour MPs called Josh.
And now to France. President Emmanuel Macron called a snap election at the beginning of June, but ended up with a giant political mess that has now consumed his Prime Minister, Michel Barnier. And we don't have a new one yet, do we? No. So Marie is going to explain it all as quickly as possible, by which I mean briefly rather than very fast. You don't have to talk fast.
But I love talking fast.
You can talk fast if you want. So he called a general election in the National Assembly right after getting a pounding in the EU elections to settle this once and for all. Was this just a terrible and avoidable mistake?
Oh, big time. No, so essentially this is actually quite funny. So the weekend of the European elections, my brother and his girlfriend were visiting from Paris. We had a lovely dinner on my balcony, we were talking, having a nice night, and then the results came out, and obviously the Rassemblement National, I keep wanting to call them the National Front. But yeah, the far right got 31% of the vote, and then the party headed by Marine Le Pen's niece got 5%, which is different flavour far right, which, yeah, we don't have time to get into that. And yeah, I mean, that dinner, obviously I will say the vibe definitely soured, but my point is that the way all of us found out there was going to be a snap election was because we were having dinner, and my brother looked at his phone, laughed, and then was like, what's going on? He got a text from his friend going, lol, snap election, is it? And yeah, and turns out that was not a joke, that we all laughed, being like, oh, that's a funny text my brother got. And then yeah. Anyway, God, that flopped so much harder than I thought. Can't win them all. But yeah, no, so he called the election as the result of the European election results, because obviously that'd been a disaster. And we think that his thinking was, either create a kind of, massive, in the way that he has done it before for presidential elections, get a proper united Republican front against the far right. Either that, or I think, the cynical theory as well, that he was a bit like, okay, they won the far right, then fucking get the far right, fine, elect them now and see how I care. Obviously, what happened was the worst possible thing in that, so the left actually got together, that was really good. Anyone from the kind of communist to the proper centre-left got together, formed this thing going, we can work together, we can make this work because we want to stop the far right. It's time for the left to really return to French politics. And they ended up topping the polls, they did really, really well. So it was them first, and then second, actually, in the end, I believe, in terms of those were the centre and then the far right, although the far right ended up getting lots of seats in the National Assembly anyway. Then what happened is that the left did what it did best, in that within seconds of the election being announced, the results being announced, they just descended into kind of fucking Asterix style, brawl. And it's just, oh, not again, just Jesus fucking Christ. But yes, so they sort of maybe after ages picked a prime minister candidate that they presented to Macron into the world, and then Macron was like, no. So yeah, didn't pick her. Lucy guessed it. She seemed fine. I think she seemed fine. No one asked me, but I personally think she seemed fine. And instead, which was kind of, again, weird fucking 5D chess. He was like, well, the parliament is now essentially, really ruled by the left and the far right. I am going to pick a centre-right prime minister. And it's like, no one, literally, quite famously, no one voted for the centre-right at that election. And that went, I would say, exactly as well as expected. And also, so it is worth saying as well, on a brief serious point, that Michel Barnier is known as Mr. Brexit, I think, here. but he stood for the leadership of his party a few years ago, and he stood on an insanely right-wing platform. Like, he wanted to stop all immigration to France for 5 years, and he wanted to try and extend the ban on the veil, the Muslim veil, to all of the EU. He thought that was a priority for France, to try and get all the EU 27 to try and ban the veil. So again, very right-wing. And then, it came into the National Assembly, and everything just went to shit incredibly quickly. And then he tried to pass a piece of legislation recently, and obviously all the parties were like, well, no, we all hate what you're trying to propose, but all of us for different reasons.
Right.
So good luck with that. And then there was a vote of no confidence, which he lost. And I will say as well, he gave us a big speech beforehand, which was very underwhelming. So I always thought he was quite an underwhelming speaker in English, but I was like, second language, not his fault. And then I was like, oh no, that's just who you are, you're just quite shit. And now here we are. He's doing really well.
That was brilliant.
Thank you.
So, what does this mean for Macron? Can he sort of get anything done? Is he like, what does he want? How is he? I don't get it. Has he been, oh no, I messed it all up? Or has he got another strategy and it's just like, move 17 is going to bring it all around?
Choosing to ignore your impression of a Frenchman for the sake of our working relationship.
I thought it was rather good.
Choosing to ignore that comment for the sake of our professional relationship. So we've got rumours. So the rumours I've heard is that he may appoint François Bayrou as a Prime Minister. Obviously, you'll know who this is. That was the trick. Obviously, you have no idea who he is. He's just a really random French politician. But no, he's very centrist. He's kind of like the French Ed Davey, I guess, or just like pure centre. Maybe you'll be here, maybe you'll someone else. But so the quite crunchy, funny thing is that he can't actually call another election for a year. So once you call a snap election, you can't call another one for a year. So they're just going to have to make something work. So one theory people have is that he may try and use, like, do not ask me what bit of the Constitution that is, because I do not know. But essentially, there's one line that says that if everything is essentially like completely broken, the President can pass legislation without having to go via the National Assembly and the Senate. So he may use that, but again, would be an obviously mental idea, because people already think he's behaving like a tiny little dictator. So I feel like behaving like a tiny little dictator would not really help his chances of doing anything. No idea. But the boring thing to say is that no one has a fucking clue what's going to happen next, because nothing can pass through the National Assembly. That we've got through. It's made of, like, to really oversimplify, 3/3 who will hate each other and will never agree on a single thing. So good luck.
Yeah. France has not had a revolution and a completely new constitution for nigh on 7 decades now. Is it time? Sixth Republic, come on. Yeah.
Sure, do you want to start? Do you want to?
He has some notes. So Marine Le Pen said our victory has only been delayed, just looking at the next presidential election, and her party was a victim of a dishonest alliance of people who hate her. Now, so the anti-Le Pen coalition has been pretty consistent. It's that second round thing, isn't it, that sort of helped Macron win twice, and it helped knock them into third place this time. Like, how long, and France actually has a history from when it really sort of was very important in the 1930s of a popular front against fascists. I mean, can that last? Is there still a kind of majority that are just like, we're just not having Le Pen? Because she always just goes, oh, next time, lads. Or whatever the French for lads, I'm not going to attempt that.
I was going to launch an Italian accent there, Willie. I was like, hey, next time, lads. And it's like, no,
hey, next time, lads.
It's hard to say. I think there's a lot of frustration on the part of the French left, and anyone from the kind of centre left to the sort of like proper far left, in which I have a lot of sympathy for. Essentially, in 2017, 2022, we elected a essentially centrist president, and then actually someone who turned out to be a centre-right president, twice. And that was essentially on the back of the votes of the left, because otherwise he would not have had the numbers. And then both times he was like, fuck the left. And so, I think there's a huge amount of frustration on the part of the left, and especially because at the election as well, so obviously when there was that big kind of new popular front, the left asked centre-right people saying, if it's a straight runoff between the far right and one of our candidates, please vote for one of our candidates. And actually quite a lot of people on the centre and centre-right were like, oh, well, we couldn't possibly vote for a left-wing coalition that involves the far left, so no, we'll be abstaining, we'll be, and I think that includes both all like normal voters, but also senior centrist and kind of centre-right politicians. And again, I think that ended up causing a lot of fury on the left, going like, motherfuckers, like, we did it with your guys twice, can you not do it with us once? So again, I worry that kind of anti-far right front has partially collapsed already, because it is clear that it's not, as powerfully felt equally on all sides, really. So yeah, fuck knows, and I'm tired of repeating that, but again, that's the boring thing, fuck knows what'll happen next, especially because there's no one obvious. And my big caveat is that by this stage of their kind of electoral cycle before 2017, Macron had still not announced that he would be standing for as candidate, so much could happen before the election in 2027. But as things stand, there's no one there who could really reasonably unite France. As things stand, I do believe that Marine Le Pen will be the next president. So yeah, how's that for being the depressing one, John?
Whoa. To cheer ourselves up, let's turn our eyes to America.
Yay!
John, many of us, perhaps not you, were optimistic about Harris Wells because, it was a vibe. Why were we so, and I actually lost money on this. Why, that's how confident I was. Why were we, it's a big, big question, but what's the main thing you would say? Like, why were we wrong, or what did we miss where we thought, because it was always meant to be close, but I think a lot of people were leaning that away.
I mean, that Peanuts cartoon of Lucy holding the football. That's what I keep thinking about. We do keep making the same mistake.
It's called hope. Hope is not a mistake, John.
I do.
That's the name of my book of poems.
But it is a mistake.
We'll live down to the next Christmas single. Thank you. I didn't think that was worth a round of applause, but thank you very much. God, I thought I was going to share. I do think there is a structural problem with politics as a whole, where the more you look at it, the less you understand it. I do think there is a genuine thing that, all of us up here, we spend our lives, all of you people as well, you spend your lives thinking about this stuff. So you're very informed about, all the crazy stuff Donald Trump had said, and what Project 2025 was, and the mad people he might put in cabinet, and everything that happened on January 6th. We all know this. And we sort of all assume that, well, obviously people are not going to vote for that. But a lot of people get to the polling station on the day and they're like, well, I feel poorer than I did 4 years ago. My life has not got better under Joe Biden. She's Joe Biden's deputy. I'm going to vote for the other guy. And I think it's enough of the electorate aren't engaged with the sort of minutiae of politics that it makes it very difficult to kind of get your head around what their motivations are if you're someone who actually cares about this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on, because the other thing is that I think a lot of us sort of wishy-washy liberals back in the UK thought once Joe Biden stepped down, we kind of, huge sigh of relief. We thought, phew, thank God, because we'd heard Joe Biden call Zelensky Putin, described Donald Trump as his vice president at one moment. That was in the same NATO press conference. That was not good news. And I kind of felt, we got Kamala Harris, and we were sort of in our own echo chamber bubble, really. And we didn't account for the fact that Donald Trump can just go, are you feeling richer or are you feeling poorer? And most people were feeling poorer.
Because that was the weird thing, that there weren't any real... People couldn't really find any real blunders in the campaign. It was like the day after, people were going, she should have gone on Joe Rogan. As if that was the kind of make or break moment, like a podcast. Podcasts aren't important. I've got to say it.
We should start the argument, though, that if Starmer doesn't come on, oh God, what now? At some point in the next general election.
We'll go, well, that was his big
He's
mistake.
such a boring guest, though.
Yeah, not as boring as Rachel Reeves. This afternoon she was asked, what would you like for Christmas? I would like everyone to be economically prosperous.
I knew
You've got to love her, haven't you? You've got to love her.
Yeah, no, that's bless her.
Am I allowed to go on top? No.
Yes.
No, really, but I think that I quite like a dry chancellor though. One of my favourite ever political quotes from recent years was when Philip Hammond was chancellor, and he got asked by the FT, "Oh, describe yourself in one word," and he went, "Fiscal."
So, I thought the biggest lie that, and I'm not being a dick about it, but the biggest lie that Kamala Harris told you in the election was because the American people are smart. And it's not an anti-American point, and it is backed up by a lot of research. It's like they're not smart in the sense of knowing really what they're voting for and what the consequences of that are. In the same way with Brexit, you can't say people didn't know what they, but they didn't, because it was really complicated, and when interviewed and polled, it was clear that they sort of didn't. They knew the vibe, but they didn't know all the bits and pieces. So I wonder whether the fact that Trump is back, despite all of his, badnesses, does that mean, that voters are up for a fascist kleptocracy, like they're really into it? Or do they just don't register? If they do register, they don't care, because it's like, well, I'm bothered by inflation. Like, in terms of interpreting the result, is it that there's this massive swing to the right, or is there just like, oh, they don't care about the fate of democratic institutions or the fact that he's a criminal?
But I think so. I'd be worried of comparing it to Brexit, in that Britain had not tried Brexit for 4 years and then got given another vote. Whereas I think the US definitely had Donald Trump for 4 years. So what I found, I was in the US covering the election, and I spoke to lots of Trump voters, and what I found actually, which kind of shocked me, is that most of the people I spoke to were not visibly insane. They were, because I kind of assume, and I think from Europe as well, I think part of you, perhaps, less kind part of you is a bit like, oh, they must all be batshit. And actually, lots of the people I talked to were educated, clever, interesting, etc., but still voting for Donald Trump. So that, but B, I think the story we missed in Europe is that Donald Trump has become entirely normalised as a candidate. So people knew, I didn't think, they were in some way mistaken about who Donald Trump was. That they knew, they were aware. And I spoke to one guy, and it still really shocked me, because he was like, he was half British, half American, and he was like, oh no, but to be fair, I'm actually quite centre right, by sort of like US standards. I think we should have more controls on guns. I think the right to abortion is really important, but I just want my taxes to be lower, so I'll be voting Trump. And it was like, and I encountered so many versions of that, of people going, oh no, I'm fully aware that he's horrific, but actually on like X and Y, he would benefit me. And I think we should start seeing that. And both that, but also people, I spoke to quite a lot of people who were just not going to bother voting either way, which I increasingly saw as a sign of radicalisation in itself. So I think being radicalised does not just mean voting for the bad guy. Becoming radicalised means also seeing the bad guy as an equally normal option to the other candidate. So yes, I think it's just that. I think America is now completely used to Donald Trump and sees him as a normal, as a regular candidate. And at least that's what shocked me, and that's what I guess I've not kind of seen coming.
John,
I'll take that.
Go on. So John, the things that at the time during the campaign we just thought, oh well, this is clearly why Trump, won't win or shouldn't win or whatever, and now just seem like less funny. And the low light for me was the debate where he's talking about they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. Yeah. What was your bit where you were just like disbelief?
I'm not sure. I had a moment, because in a sense I too had become normalised to Donald Trump. His capacity to shock me had sort of, the barrier had moved, really. And, so when he starts, cats and dogs and stuff like that, I mean, it just felt like, that's Donald Trump being Donald Trump, really. And
what is he like?
Yeah, it's the kind of excuse that, people make for Nigel Farage as well. It's Nigel being Nigel. And I also think that...
Have you ever tried that? Does that ever work for you, like normal people? Do you ever just go, it's just John being John?
Yeah, it doesn't generally tend to pay off too well, actually. I think you need more charisma or something like that. But I mean, and the other thing is that, you know, in the same way, Reform voters don't identify themselves as far right, and Trump voters don't. I think most of them don't identify themselves as far right either. You know, again, the bars have moved somewhat.
John, Trump's nominees, and if he's been following this closely, but like fucking yikes. It's like this rogues gallery of like cranks, bigots, abusers. Do you expect, like, does that matter? Like, is that normalized? Because you've normalized Trump, but when it's just like, here's alcoholic sex pest Pete Hegseth, or, you know, anti-vax which which animals does he kill? All of them. You know, worm-brained animal killer Robert F. Kennedy Jr., possible Russian Assad and Assad fangirl Tulsi Gabbard, etc., etc.
Mike Getz. Do you remember the Attorney General? The Attorney General,
Matt
nominee.
Gaetz. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the only one that was actually, if people they were just like, no, actually, not you. Is that going to bring out any sort of buyer's remorse? Because it's chaotic.
I just can't see how it could. I can't see what the mechanism is. Like, Trump is very good at floating above that. And like, also, there is an extent to which, I don't know how conscious it is, but his sort of genius is the ability to kind of feed the media machine. And as we found out repeatedly, it doesn't really matter if the things he's feeding into the media machine are terrible. It just means that people are talking about his administration. I don't think that's necessarily going to play badly for him. What I think there could be buyer's remorse over is if he goes through with this threat of tariffs, that's going to put prices up. That's going to be really bad for people's wallets, pocketbooks. I think that could come back to bite him. But also, I think you have to ask, what do consequences for him look like at this stage? Like, he can't constitutionally run again. It probably hits them in the midterms, but like there's just a lot of sort of muttering about how, like, you know, it's going to be, the more time the Republicans have in office, the kind of more the deck is stacked in their favour.
But do you think it's important to sort of remember that, as I think the economist Jamel Bowie puts it, like, there's a tendency to maybe think of him as this sort of unstoppable god king now, and that, like, whatever there are no guardrails and there are no roadblocks, and whatever he wants he gets. But there is actually, like, lots of ways in which, like we said, government is hard. He's not very good at it. There are still all these people that are trying to sort of stop him, and there are all these things that are simply not going to work. So if we're looking, trying to be some, you know, on the glass half full side of things.
So he did, okay, he won this year, that wasn't good, but he did lose the previous election. Like, you know, he is not invincible.
Well, he disagrees.
He does. He feels strongly about it.
I'm being very BBC about it. We just need to point out that he disagrees.
But also, I mean, like, there's a lot of paranoia about could he change the constitution to run for a third term? And we had, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the guest we had.
Andy Kroll.
Yes, who explained very slowly and carefully that, like, no, that's just not going to happen, just because of the way the constitution is set up. It is impossible to imagine anyone getting any constitutional amendment through at this point in history. So, like, he is not going to be able to run for a third term. Whether that means he leaves the White House is possibly a different question. Yeah. But that's a problem for January 2029.
Marie, on the other side, the post-election blame game was very intense and depressing, and it turns out that everybody realised that the way to have won the election was what they believed. Whereas I always assume the way to do it is probably not, just do the opposite of what I want, and that's probably the best way. Given that it was still fairly close, like the popular vote margin was like less than 2%, it was all these sort of margins in the swing states. I mean, was there sort of over-interpreting there, where it was kind of like, well, we've got to rip it up and start again, and we're going to, here's a list of the minorities we're going to throw under the bus, you know? What do you make of that? Are you sort of confident that the Democrats will sort of emerge from it with a sort of sensible response? No, I actually feel that could happen. It's not a joke question.
I don't have my full faith in the Democrats learning the right lessons, because that's not something they've historically always been the best at. But no, so I think and obviously, look, I'm guilty as well. I'm a columnist. I spend my entire day on social media every day, etc. But I think there's always a bit like, you know, kind of the BBC going, oh, reform, and actually Labour was the big thing. I think people always find, like people in the media, etc., people who are very online, will always find the obvious explanations a bit boring, the obvious things a bit boring. But one thing, for example, which I think has not been talked about that much is that, you know, Kamala was a woman. And that's something, again, and I don't want to be, but actually, no, I absolutely want to do the thing of like, and when I was in the US reporting on the election, you know, and I think that's something that sort of either came up, you know, definitely, as in people were just quite sexist about Kamala, or they would say things that made it clear that, you know, their decision to vote for Trump and not vote was clearly like influenced by her gender. And although it's my absolute favourite, it was a guy who, you know, who seemed fine, kind of like undecided voter, but quite friendly. And then he was like, but you know, like it's. So, I mean, I'm laughing, it's really not funny, but he was like, I'm just really worried, you know, about the future, like, you know, the state the world is in. I feel like, you know, the world is a really dangerous place at the moment, and, you know, the two choices we have to present to the world are really bad. Like, no one's going to take us seriously, because we'll either have a felon or a woman. I was just there, like, they're the same thing, that's correct. I've committed many felonies, so yeah. But yeah, and I think again, that's something that either came up really obviously or came up in small ways. And I'm a bit like, okay, why not just think about the fact that 2 women ran against Trump and they lost, and 1 man ran against Trump and he won. You know, and I think some my worry is that they're going to keep going, oh well, you know, Latino men between 27 and 32 voted that way, when it's like, okay, like all big picture, a lot of people hate women still. Like, you know, it's just, and I know that's boring, because that's just, you know, one of those big boring things. Are you clapping at a lot of people hate women?
Let's hear it for misogyny. John, Joe Biden promised a return to normality. Essentially, that was part of the pitch. Like, this is fucking chaos. Let's just try and restore some norms and civility and stability. Americans don't seem to like want normality, or they don't want it as, you know, or next to inflation, they don't care. They would rather their pocketbooks. So I don't know. I don't have a. Do you have a pocketbook?
I think it just means wallet, doesn't it?
Oh, okay. I thought it was a special, fancy voter's wallet. Yeah. So anyway, they obviously didn't care that much about normality. Do we have to, you know, seriously regard America differently now in terms of the world that we grew up in, where American, you know, and you know, for good or ill, was sort of the guarantor of, like, you know, Western security and this, that, and the driver of prosperity. And that we just kind of like, you can't rely on it, because the first time they elected Trump, because unfortunate error, very close, aberration, we'll get through it and then it'll go back. Now they've done it again, and it's like, why wouldn't they do it again? I mean, not with Trump, who will hopefully be dead, but with like another kind of ghoul. So do we just have to kind of like just change the way that we think about America? Assuming you're not somebody who just despises America.
I think on balance, yes. I mean, I don't think it was just the sort of Democrats who have been sort of deconstructing the election. I think the Republicans have too, because I think Trump's whole thing was that he wanted it to be a fight. You know, he wanted to go to war with the Democrats, you know, having an election stolen. And when sort of on the same day, virtually, Kamala Harris concedes, he goes, what? You know, this wasn't in the playbook at all. And, you know, we haven't talked about Elon Musk yet. I mean, you know, he is sort of hanging around, you know, now as the Department of Government Efficiency. I mean, which is kind of curious, because if there was, you know, they could get rid of him. You know,
they've got 2 heads. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I mean, that's an easy win, though, isn't it? Really. And you know, and I kind of think, you know, to be honest, Britain has been the outlier this year in terms of elections, in terms of, you know, kind of returning a centre-left party, and. You know, I think the world is a kind of more dangerous place, and it's a more frightening place. And I think there are kind of, you know, structural systemic problems, and that's why I worry about what's going to happen here. Because about 50 years ago, there were 15 working people for every retired pensioner. Now there are 3, and the maths don't add up anymore. You know, you can't run an economy on that basis. You know, you can't be that productive.
Younger people are doing their bit by not being able to retire at any point. So that will change the figures.
Yeah. Well, Marie, you posted something on Blue Sky, which I thought really struck home about the Gilets jaunes as sort of harbingers of this like age of rage, which is ideologically incoherent. So it's not right, it's not left, it's just very pissed off. And if you've been following the story of Luigi Mangione, the alleged assassin.
Oh, come on, he did it.
The killer fuckboy. And there's quite a similar confusion about that. I mean, as indeed there was some, you know, with the attempted Trump assassins that we've all forgotten about. Was it sort of like, are you left, are you right? It's almost like the sort of the olden days when it's like, are they an anarchist bomb thrower? Or, you know, a fascist assassin, and then we know what we're dealing with. And now they were going through like these people sort of reading lists, and it's just like it doesn't point in one direction. So is that what you think is happening now? There's just going to be a lot of anger that you can't necessarily go as far right or far left or whatever.
I have a really good hot take on that, thank you for asking. Also, that post I made after like 4 glasses of wine, I'm amazed that it really stood up the test of time. Actually, that was not a stupid take. No, so I think, bear with me, it's going to sound like I'm off topic, I'm not off topic. So when I wrote a fun book which I'd recommend as nearly Christmas on kind of, you know, like eccentric former MPs, you know, back when politics was mad and fun, etc. But so what I find really interesting about reading about MPs from the, you know, 17th century till maybe like mid-20th was actually how entirely ideologically incoherent they all were. So obviously they were broadly left or right, you know, sort of like Labour or Tory or like Whig or Conservative, etc. But actually, if you read, you know, a list of where they stood, how they voted, is that this makes no sense at all whatsoever. And that was all of them. That was not, you know, isolated things. So actually, the thought of having even just politicians who are, you know, coherent kind of ideologically, you can put in quite a specific space, is a very recent phenomenon. And I think that that's actually been harmful in some ways because that's sort of allowed us to maybe think as nerds. That you know, everyone is like that, and actually that is a very recent thing, but B, I think that's always been a very small segment of the population who is, you know, either very high information voters or people who actively work in politics and the media who are like, oh well, I belong in this niche of the, you know, the political spectrum. But actually, I think what we're seeing is not necessarily a new phenomenon because people, again, until recently, politicians were all over the place. Voters have kind of always been as well, and I don't know if you've ever seen, I think it's called the median voter bot or something. That there's a really funny bot she's doing on Twitter, is on Blue Sky now, and then it's real voters. And if you look at, I don't know, you know, like Mary, 66-year-olds from Essex, you know, didn't go to uni, whatever. And it's like, oh, so I'm really worried about the environment. I hate immigration. I don't know. I'm trying to find, you know, sort of like stuff. You know, I really deeply care about voting, like, you know, political reform. I want PR. But also, I think feminism has gone too far. I vote Green, you know, and you just, and you know, it is a really good.
But the Greens have that as well, though, because you look at the range of people who vote Green, the range of people who vote, you know, Lib Dem, and that's why it's sort of quite hard knowing what to deliver for those, you know, for those people because they disagree. Even just like build houses, don't build houses, you know, and they're divided. So I do actually think that basically I've been brought up on a myth of the left-right spectrum, and that everybody can just be like placed on it, and they're like, this is sort of what they believe about the role of the state and, you know, social, you know, civil rights and stuff like that. I don't think it's all bollocks. I don't think anyone knows why they believe what they believe.
It's not anything. That's why
I give up. I'm done.
Origin story's cancelled, guys.
Obviously, the guy famously who like
keep it coming.
The guy who shot Trump famously had also Googled to see if Joe Biden was coming near his house anytime soon. So he just wanted to shoot a president.
Buy one, get one free.
But a lot of assassins are like that. They have like they're not that like the guy who shot John Lennon. You know, he was going to shoot David Bowie, but David Bowie wasn't around. Like that's again, it's not that deep. I mean, it's deep for the person who gets assassinated, but it's not that coherent. Anyway, so that's a little dark, but not as dark as the minds of the people who work on the comments page of Britain's very own Book of Revelation, the Daily Telegraph. So it's one last party game for the panel. We have because we like cancel culture, we have cancelled one word from each of these headlines. And so the panel has to guess what it is. So the first one, these are all bangers, strictly bangers, by the way. So the first one from Sherelle Jacobs. By the way, if anybody follows either reads the Telegraph or just enjoys following these weirdos, you'll know who these people are. They'll be like this, like hearing about the Beatles. So Sherelle Jacobs, I think it's the George Harrison of the comment page, why blank the politics of zombies must be killed?
Feminism.
Zombies.
I know these are politics of literal zombies. I know the literal zombies have that. They're very coherent voters.
Oh, it maybe like on exoskeleton, like health, something maybe a lot. I don't know, like fatty foods, or like one of those weird things like woke. Do I just have to pick a word, or can I just keep talking in general?
No, it just has to be a word. That's the game.
Woke.
What is the politics of zombies that must be killed?
Yeah, just.
But
woke.
zombies are already dead.
Yeah.
I don't think she's understood the zombie.
Yeah. Twitter.
And centrism.
Oh.
Number 2, Michael Deacon, the Ringo. Left-wing prigs want to ban the blank. We can't let them. What do left-wing prigs?
Christmas.
Is it the something? Did you say? Is it the something?
Want to ban the something. Well,
the army.
John,
The thong.
John, you're a left-wing prig. What do you want to ban?
The Beatles. Something with the Beatles.
It is, of course, the pint. So get them while you can before the prigs ban them. Okay, now it's Alison Pearson. He's kind of the Mark Chapman of the career. Blank is killing us. It is an enemy of Britain. What does Alison Pearson think is killing us?
Woke.
Marine.
My child's failure to get into Cambridge.
It is, twist, the NHS. From this country, Zoe Strimple. The country is falling apart. So why on earth are we banning blank?
Oh, that's the fast food adverts, isn't it?
It's porridge adverts.
Sorry, are we banning porridge adverts?
No,
we
we're
are,
not.
actually.
We're not. None of these are true. It's a Labour crackdown on junk food, so like sugary foods. On TV.
I mean, it is, to be fair, it is, someone did point out, I hate to with the Telegraph, but it is slightly weird that, yeah, that really sweet porridge will no longer be able to be advertised on the tube, but euthanasia is still fine.
Well, only for some people.
But I might try euthanasia, but I wouldn't try sweet porridge. I mean on myself, not on someone else. I'm not a serial killer. Number 5. Alison Pearson, back once again, like a renegade master. The fat jab has worked for me, and it can help cure...
Fat people.
Woke.
Boris.
The economy. You have to put the economy on Ozempic. Details TBC. Then we have, the king. The Lennon and McCartney rolled into one. Alistair Heath. Yay. From the week before the general election, blank is upon us, and Britain will never be the same again.
Armageddon.
It is Armageddon.
It's the best one. Alistair Heath again. Starmer's Britain is no longer a free country, it's an dystopia.
Totalitarian.
No, so it begins with a vowel, that's the clue.
Armageddon again. Everything's
I'll give
Armageddon.
you a clue, it really upset me personally.
Orwellian.
There we go, very good. And I was like, well, actually, I don't think it is Orwellian, and perhaps if you've read his essays. Finally, another one from Zoe Strimple. Gangs of feral youths rule our streets. It's like Clockwork Orange. Not even blank is safe.
Bingo.
Chelsea.
Henley on Thames.
Waitrose! So watch out for the feral youths in
Okay,
Waitrose.
I'm going to defend Zoe Strimple because I would absolutely click that column. And I want to know.
Well, thank you very much. That is the end of our Christmas show 2024. And thank you to our excellent, very funny Quizmasters panel, Marie Leconte, Jonn Elledge, and special guest, John Crace. And thank you for coming, and if you're watching on the live stream, thank you as well. Patrons are the reason that we can do this at all, so we are very grateful to you. And hats off to the other regulars on the podcast, Ros Taylor, Matt Green, Hannah Fern, Rachel Cunliffe, Zoe Grunewold, Raf Bear, Seth Tabo, and Yasmin Sahan. And to the backroom team, Jarv, Chris, Jade, Robin, Liam, Simon, Tom, Jim, Andrew, and Martin. Now it's time for your questions. We have a roving mic. And as usual, because of the lights, I probably would not be able to see anything. Roving mic man.
Is it on?
What now? What? Where are you?
Hello.
He's here.
Hello.
Sorry.
I don't know if you, like me, follow all of Liz Truss's social media accounts. But she's tweeted a story, astonishingly, by the Wall Street Journal about her battle against the civil service. And she spent, she won Elon Musk and Donald Trump against the British civil service for some reason. I mean, do you think that there is a genuine point somewhere in there? Because obviously, Keir Starmer criticized the civil service and then backed off very hurriedly when there seemed to be some briefing against him. So do you think there's a serious point in there somewhere, or is Liz Truss just completely...
Well, Liz Truss occasionally, like a broken clock, does sort of say something, make an observation, but you know, like I think in her book, which I have read, you know, she goes, "Oh, well, number 10 isn't a very functional workplace." So it's like, oh, that's fair enough. It's probably not the reason why you failed, but still. So with the civil service, though, it's like it's such a vast thing. Of course, it's legit to criticise the way the operation of the civil service and maybe certain incentives, structure and structural things, but just not from that. I mean, Dominic Cummings had problems with the civil service. Marie.
Thank you. Hello. No, I did partially write a book on that, so I'm like, yes, my moment. So I think there's a genuine problem, which is that people who work in politics, so be that, you know, mostly MPs, but parliamentary assistants, etc., just these people fundamentally do not understand Whitehall. They don't understand how civil servants work at all, and because no one's ever taught them, and also they're two completely different worlds. So especially if you come in from opposition, or even if you're just an MP and then you come in as a minister, you're coming into this world where you don't understand it at all. And this is a very boring wonkish point, but you started it. But I think so that's why when you look at special advisors, they're all used to that. These used to be people like proper greybeards who really understood Whitehall, but also had a foot in Parliament, and you know, and their role was very much to be like, okay, minister, come into this weird, wonderful world. I can explain to you how stuff works, but also if you want X or Y or Z to happen, then I can make that work because I know how to speak the language of civil servants. And then eventually, and we don't have time to get into why, all special advisors became sort of, you know, 24-year-olds called Simon, who just came from like Conservative Special Office or the Labour equivalent. And then it's a bit like, no, but then these people don't understand the civil service either, so like, that's not why have you hired them? And so I think that's generally part of the reason why there's been this growing disconnect between the politics side of politics and the kind of Whitehall side of politics, because there's no longer anyone acting as a conduit.
Just want to say the general rule of thumb, though, if you ever think Liz Truss is right, she's right in the wrong way. You must never get into thinking that she has a point, because you go down a dark path.
I also think that, yesterday we had Pat McFadden saying that he wants the civil service to act more like internet startups. And you kind of think, well, 80% of them fail, don't they? That's the point of them. So I'm not quite sure. The civil service are clearly a sort of, an easy target. You know, that's why kind of Keir's gone for them, because he knows that plays well with focus groups at the moment. People are fed up with them. They think, you know, we can blame civil servants for, you know, the country not working properly, for the NHS waiting lists or whatever. I mean, it's probably got nothing to do with them, but I mean, they're going for them anyway.
You don't want the Department of Transport to start like a startup and then close down and get acquired by Meta or something, do you?
I think the right-wing media bubble is to blame for a lot of this, because it is literally people rise to the surface by saying the right things, and then they don't know anything. Like by definition, if you say, well, it's actually a bit more complicated than that, which it often is, then you're not going to you're not going to have mistrust as rise. I would also just like to note very quickly that Marie has been excellent at promoting 2 of her books. And I was wondering whether anyone else on the panel might have any books that the audience may wish to buy for family members this Christmas.
Yeah, as it happens.
They're not available in the lobby, sadly. Okay, next question.
Hi, so this question is mostly for Marie. I was really interested in what you said about Trump voters being selfish rather than insane. And I'm wondering whether that's very tied up with the kind of capitalist individualism, and because there are other capitalist societies in the world, maybe that could spread. And so with the kind of rampant individualism, especially in the social media age, are we just going to see a decline in the value of institutions according to the voters?
That's a very big question, isn't it? I think the very short version is I still think that the US is kind of like in a space of its own. Like people, like that there is a culture of like selfishness and individualism there, which I personally found really shocking, but in that way as well, where you can't even really get mad at people because it's like this is so obviously cultural for you and you have no idea you're being incredibly selfish, that, you know, I can possibly hold it against you. And one of the things actually which I found really interesting is that, and that's kind of hitting on the left, but because the left for a long time said, you know, we need massive pay rises, especially for the working classes in the US who had very few rights and were paid very badly, etc. Joe Biden provided that, which I think seemingly has been forgotten by everyone. You know, like, I think a lot of working class people in the US got a massive pay rise over the 4 years he was president. But the thing is, as a result, a lot of stuff that relies on minimum wage labour, you know, their prices went up. So be that, you know, your Deliveroos and, you know, like kind of food, a lot of the inflation stuff came from people finally being paid a decent wage. So it was quite funny in a way to see middle class left-wing people going, well, I can no longer get takeout 3 times a week, so I'm guessing Biden is to blame and fuck him. And it's like, but this is what you wanted, that this is what, so yes, I think the US still, I'm not too worried about that specific dynamic, I think, moving over to other bits of the world yet, because they do feel like they're in kind of plane of existence in that regard. But
well, I love so many aspects of America, but we're just doing this origin story episodes on the Daily Mail, history of the Daily Mail, and there's this weird thing that happened with David English, the editor during the 70s and 80s, and then Paul Dacre, and they both basically were sort of kind of, you know, lefty or sort of at least sort of centrist, and they went to America just for a few years for work and came back ravingly right-wing and obsessed with money. And it was this really strange thing. It keeps coming up in people's biographies. They come back from America and it's just like, it's great over there. They don't give a fuck about anything except money. Which is not how I think of America, but they clearly notice something there, which is, and I think it is very unique in the way that Marie says. You can't necessarily extrapolate, which is probably a good thing right now.
More questions? Get your hands in the air. Wave like you just don't care.
Hello. So there's a competing podcast you might have heard of called Origin Story. And one of its presenters is a gentleman named, if you'll pardon my French a moment, Ian, I hate my surname because it rhymes with cunt, who I believe is somewhere in the audience this evening. When he departed from Oh God What Now, the promise was that he'd occasionally return as a guest, and yet he's almost never come back. What do we have to do? What happened?
Is this question firing the panel?
He's just very very busy doing the other thing with me. Well, we can ask him. I didn't even know he was here. If he is here, then no, don't badge him. That'd be awful. I'll ask him. I'll tell you what. I'll ask him, and maybe if there's something special, like an election or an assassination or something, he'll deign to return. Next question. I'm not the mic man.
Hold on a second.
Do you want me to come over this side? Or?
You see, in the middle, you can't ask questions because my arms are not long enough.
This is really, really puerile. It's for Marie. Is Dorian's American accent worse or better than his French accent?
I think you should do both right now so we can compare.
You can vote.
What should I say in the?
It was the cats and dogs that got me.
Oh, what? They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the pets. Or they're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the pets.
That was like hearing myself. Fuck it up.
I know. Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity.
Have you got any questions about politics? Really? You know,
It's got very Christmassy though. I like it.
Well, Christmas.
You talked earlier about the Labour's Ming-Va strategy and how it worked. Did it?
Yes, good.
We've just had a relaunch. No one seems to know what they stand for.
How many Ming-Va?
John, you brought up the Roy Jenkins's old Ming-Va's idea.
It worked to get them elected. I mean, that's as far as it goes, really. I mean, you're right. I mean, I've counted 4 resets since then. And, you know, it's quite clearly that they hadn't really got a plan for being in office. And, you know, they are trying to do something that they should probably have done months ago. You know, because we all knew that they were going to win the election, and they spent their whole time just sort of fretting over the election day and not thinking as far as governing. And I mean, the long and short of it also is that their support is quite shallow. Yes, they've got a 170-seat majority, but that is there isn't much enthusiasm for them in the country at the moment. And I mean, that worries me, and I think it should worry us all, which is why I, you know, take the threat of Nigel Farage quite seriously, because, I mean, it's okay that the Tories are now officially a joke figure, and, you know, I don't think anyone's thinking about them winning the next election. But I think Labour strategists are really concerned that, you know, there could be a reform surge if things don't work out. And as, you know, John and others have pointed out, Labour's inheritance was terrible. You know, it's not a 1997 scenario when Tony Blair took over and we could all feel quite good about ourselves. Things are genuinely shit at the moment.
Someone's just said they've made it more shit than it was.
I don't think that's true.
No, I don't think
they made it.
Are you a farmer? Do you have a large estate somewhere?
Are you a wealthy landowner?
I feel like they sort of like decided that working out how things were going to work in government was Sue Gray's job. And like that was very much her side of the operation.
And she didn't do it. And then they looked in her big book. What's in your big book? And it's just doodles.
Yeah.
No plans.
God, I have to govern the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can overshoot on this. Like, things are really bad. Things are pretty bad. But also, I'm going to steal a thought from my friend Jim, because he likes when I do that. He pointed out that, like, as it stands, the last possible date for the UK general election is about 6 months after Trump will leave office, we hope. It's a bloody long way away. A lot of the problems in the world at the moment, a lot of the people losing elections at the moment, it is because of the inflation thing. It is like inflation is very, very bad for incumbents. I think basically if Labour can get NHS waiting lists down, if the economy starts growing again, if inflation isn't too terrible, I think they've got a reasonable chance of being re-elected. And helpfully, those are the things we would like them to do anyway. So I would worry if it's still like this in a year. I would really worry if it's still like this in 2 years. But I don't think it's panic stations just yet, and I absolutely do not think they've made it worse.
I'm going to be slightly more pessimistic. So I think my worry, and it kind of, I think, in terms of all the resets and stuff, is that Keir Starmer is not an ideological man. And I've seen some people may think that's good, etc. But I think he doesn't really do ideology. I think Rachel Reeves definitely doesn't either. And I'm concerned that that's a problem. I think you do need some sense of where you're going. That is actually a bit, and even Tony Blair had it, just because he was centre-left doesn't mean he didn't have a sense of ideology that was quite strong. And I think having that kind of sense of where you're travelling and why you're doing stuff, a story about why you're doing what you're doing, what kind of Britain you want to create, that's the glue that holds your project together. And I think, when you look at why Labour is doing the stuff it's doing, occasionally it is clearly struggling to explain why. So I think that, that pensioners had the cuts on the fuel, I can't remember, fuel allowance and stuff. You keep getting Rachel Reeves, someone from the Treasury, going, well, we have to, and it's but that doesn't work. You need to have a bigger picture, a bigger thing. It can't just be eat your greens. It's going to be eat your greens so you grow big and strong and you can slay the dragons or whatever. That parents know that, and I think government should know that as well. You need a sense of overriding. What's the picture you're trying to paint? And I worry that Keir doesn't have that, and he's appointed someone as his number 2 who doesn't really have that sense either. So that's my slight pessimistic.
It's like what is wise and wise, isn't it? Instead of Morecambe and Wise, it's just you can't have 2 straight men.
Oh, I just had a really dumb comment that I misheard Maria saying, "Eat your brains," and I was. That is a bad.
That's the zombies from the Telegraph.
No one's going to vote for that.
So another question. I think we've got one down the front. We've got one down the front.
Somebody up here who's far away from where they would get questions again.
Okay. By the way, I don't know how this is going to work out, but the last question, I think, should be very festive and not about impending doom. Just saying.
It links almost to what you were just saying. But why is the PR for the left always worse than the PR for evil?
The 2 political factions, the left and evil.
I will answer that, and because basically most of the media is right-wing biased, and therefore they give the left a far harder time than when Tory failures are sort of explained away and sort of slightly embarrassed, and they can get away with all sorts of things that the Labour Party can't, and that's why they need to up their game, because they got to play by the rules.
Well, the left is sort of be quicker to be dissatisfied. So there was no equivalent of, when Liz Truss announced her budget, announced that budget, and Alistair Heath, our friend, just went, best budget ever! And loads of the papers did that. They were like, hooray! And of course, then it just kind of went off like a bomb. But it had cheerleaders, and nothing that Starmer Reeves does, it just basically, in the equivalent, the left-wing press, what there is of it, just goes, is it enough though? So there is definitely that. It's not like there's any outriders, really.
No, absolutely.
The People's Front of Judea bit is basically a documentary. There is nothing that the left hates more than a different bit of the left.
But I love the way that people would just go well, what we really need is just a really inspiring leader. And you just go, oh, great. Is that all we need? You know what I mean? It's just something
in the room tonight?
An inspiring, left-leaning populist, who can take the fight. And it's like, I would love one, but easier said than done. I think it's the last. Is it the last question? It's got to be funny. Please, not about fascism. She's smiling.
Right.
So either it's a trap,
right,
or it's a good one.
Right. Is it Christmassy? Yeah. Do you swear on your life that it's Christmassy? You've got Christmas trees on your t-shirt. Right. Christmassy question.
Apart from,
you can hold the microphone. You have to lean into it.
Apart from economic stability, what would you like for Christmas?
I would like to be filthy rich. You never know if anyone's in the room yet.
More bloody houses.
I'm going to go sentimental. I'd just like my daughter to come over from Minnesota.
I would just like everyone here to buy one book for each member of the panel. Buy each member of the panel. That makes us very happy. Although, to be honest, I did find The Fall of Assad quite Christmassy. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's somebody that you just think, oh, he just keeps winning and winning and killing and torturing and torturing, and nothing that anyone does helps. And then in like less than 2 weeks, it's just like, oh, bye then. And I did find that, and with very little sort of bloodshed. And I found that whatever happens next, I found that quite uplifting and festive. And on that note, sorry if we didn't get around to answer your question. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for watching and listening during the year. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.